He tied burning fuses under his hat to look like a demon. He blockaded an entire American city for a week. And the craziest part, his whole pirate career lasted just 15 months. This is the story of a man who became a legend by understanding that being scary is better than being strong. Grab your blanket. We are going to the Pirate Republic of Nassau. Chapter 1. The Guy Before the Beard. Before he was the most feared pirate in the Atlantic, he was just Edward Teach, a British sailor from Bristol who was doing an honest job for a living. He worked on privateer ships during the Queen Anne's War, which is a fancy way of saying he was a government-approved pirate with a license to steal. The British government gave him a legal document called a letter of marque that let him rob French and Spanish ships, and he did exactly that for years. He was good at it. He made real money. He had a future ahead of him. Then the war suddenly ended in 1713, and the British government shut the entire privateering operation down with no warning. Thousands of trained sailors with no education, no savings, and absolutely no job prospects were dumped onto the streets of Caribbean ports overnight. These men knew how to sail a ship through a hurricane. They knew how to fight hand-to-hand on a moving deck. They knew how to board an enemy vessel and take what they wanted. They just had nowhere legal to do any of it anymore. The Caribbean turned into a pirate factory almost instantly because England created more outlaws than it could hang. Edward Teach watched all of this happen and made a simple calculation in his head. He could go back to England and work as a dock laborer for pennies a day, or he could take what he wanted by force and live like a king for as long as he survived. The choice was not a hard one to make. He signed up with a famous pirate captain named Benjamin Hornigold and sailed out of Nassau with the rest of the desperate men. The British government had turned a perfectly good sailor into a criminal by taking away his war, and that criminal would soon become a legend that terrified the entire Atlantic coast. Chapter 2. The funniest stat in pirate history. Here is the wildest thing about Blackbeard. His entire career as a pirate captain lasted about 15 months total. 15 months, start to finish. From the moment he got his own command to the moment he died with a cutlass in his hand. Barely a year and a quarter passed by on the calendar. Everything you think you know about him, every movie you have seen, every Halloween costume with a fake beard and a tricorn hat, every story about buried treasure and burning fuses and swashbuckling adventures, all of it happened in the span of a single year. The man was not a long reign like a king or an emperor. He was a meteor that burned across the sky and disappeared. Most pirate careers ended the same way, with a rope around the neck or a bullet through the chest. But Blackbeard packed more legend into those 15 months than most pirates packed into a full decade of raiding. He captured dozens of ships. He blockaded an entire American port for a week. He terrified every sailor on the Atlantic coast with nothing but a look and a reputation. And then he died in the most dramatic hand-to-hand sword fight in naval history. It is almost like he knew he only had a short window of time to make his mark on the world. He did not waste a single day of it. He woke up every morning and asked himself what he could do that would make people talk about him forever. And then he went out and did it before breakfast. 15 months is shorter than your average high school romance, and we are still talking about Edward Teach 3 centuries later. Chapter 3. The Island of Outlaws. Nassau in the Bahamas was not a normal city by any definition of the word. It was a pirate republic, a safe haven run entirely by criminals for criminals. hundreds of wanted men living together on a small tropical island, running their own society with their own laws and their own leaders. They elected their captains by popular vote. They voted on how to split every piece of treasure they captured. They wrote detailed codes of conduct that specified exactly how much compensation a pirate got for losing a leg in battle, a hand in a sword fight, or an eye in a cannon blast. Blackbeard arrived in Nassau and found himself surrounded by the most dangerous collection of men on the face of the earth. Benjamin Hornigold, the pirate captain who taught him everything he knew. Charles Vane, a complete psychopath who would later burn his own ship rather than let the Navy capture it. And Stede Bonnet, a wealthy plantation owner who had abandoned his wife and children to chase the pirate dream. The social dynamics of Nassau were fascinating to watch. Every single man on that island had a price on his head. Everyone was ready to betray everyone else for the right amount of gold. And yet they had rules, laws, and a functioning society that worked better than most legitimate governments. Blackbeard watched everything carefully and learned how the game was played. He saw that the men who scared people the most got the most respect and the biggest shares of treasure. He started planning something bigger than just stealing gold. He wanted to become the name that made other pirates jealous. Chapter 4: The Look That Won the War. Blackbeard's appearance was not a fashion choice. It was a deliberate military weapon designed to terrify people before a single shot was fired. He grew his beard long and wild, thick black hair that covered most of his face like a dark curtain. He braided it with black ribbons and sometimes tied the ends up into little knots to make himself look even more demonic and inhuman. Before every battle, he stuck slow-burning hemp fuses under his hat, right next to his ears where they would smolder and smoke. The fuses curled around his face and made it look like he was on fire from the inside out, like a demon that had crawled up from hell to collect souls. He strapped 6 loaded pistols across his chest on a leather sling so he could draw 2 at a time without reloading. The complete effect was absolutely terrifying to witness. He looked like something that had crawled straight out of a nightmare. Merchant sailors who saw Blackbeard approaching did not think about fighting for their cargo. They thought about how fast they could surrender and stay alive. Most of them gave up before he even fired a cannon. Why would you fight a man who looks like he is already dead and on fire? The image that Blackbeard created did more work than any weapon on his ship. He understood something that modern marketers and politicians understand very well. Your brand is everything in this world. He was not just a pirate. He was a monster who walked like a man, and the monster was always more effective than the man. Chapter 5: The time he blockaded an American city. In May of 1718, Blackbeard sailed his flagship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, straight to Charleston, South Carolina. He did not just attack the port and leave. He sat there and blocked the entire harbor completely for a full week. No ship could enter or leave Charleston while Blackbeard was in charge of the water. Every vessel that tried to pass was captured immediately by his waiting crew. The city was completely trapped with no way out. Food supplies could not come in through the port. Trade goods could not go out to other markets. The entire economy of a British colonial capital ground to a halt because one pirate had decided to park his ship in the way and wait. And what did Blackbeard demand as ransom for releasing the port? A chest of medicine for his crew. Not gold bars, not silver coins, medicine for sick and wounded pirates. He held an entire American city hostage until the governor agreed to send him a box of pills and bandages. The absurdity of the situation is perfect comedy. a pirate with burning fuses in his hat blockading one of the most important ports in America for basic medical supplies. The governor of South Carolina had to negotiate with a wanted criminal as if he were a foreign ambassador. He sent the medicine by boat. Blackbeard released the captured ships, and then he sailed away laughing at how easy it had been. He did not really need the medicine that badly. He needed to prove that he could shut down an entire city anytime he felt like it. Chapter 6. The rich guy who played pirate, one of Blackbeard's most unlikely companions, was Stede Bonnet, a wealthy sugar plantation owner from Barbados. Bonnet had everything a man could want: plenty of money, acres of land, a wife, children, a comfortable life with servants and nice meals, and he abandoned all of it to run away and become a pirate on the high seas. The only problem was that Bonnet had absolutely no idea how to be a pirate. He did not know how to sail a ship in a straight line. He did not know how to navigate using the stars. He did not know how to fight with a sword or fire a cannon. He bought a ship anyway, called it the Revenge, hired a crew with his own money, and paid them a regular salary instead of splitting treasure equally. Even his own crew thought he was a joke. Bonnet spent most of his time sitting in his cabin reading books while his men did all the actual work of piracy. When he met Blackbeard on the open ocean, the two formed an alliance that was basically a comedy duo in real life. Blackbeard, the terrifying demon king of the Atlantic, with smoke coming out of his hat, and Stede Bonnet, the rich tourist playing dress-up because he was bored with his comfortable life. Blackbeard eventually took control of Bonnet's ship and put his own man in charge of sailing it, because Bonnet could not be trusted to navigate from one island to the next. The gentleman pirate was a walking joke on the high seas, but Blackbeard kept him around because Bonnet had money and was useful as a decoy. Chapter 7. The Fake Retirement. After the Charleston blockade made him the most wanted man on the Atlantic coast, Blackbeard knew that the heat was coming for him soon. The British Navy was not going to let a pirate shut down an American port and just walk away without consequences. So he pulled off a clever move that bought him some time and a second chance. He sailed his massive flagship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, into a shallow inlet on the North Carolina coast and deliberately ran the ship aground on a sandbar. The damage was too severe to repair. The ship that had terrorized the Atlantic was gone, stuck forever in the mud. He sent most of his crew away with shares of treasure and told them the partnership was over for good. Then he took a small sloop and sailed into Ocracoke Inlet, a remote and hidden spot on the coast that was perfect for hiding from the Navy. He basically disappeared from the world for a while. He sent a message to the governor of North Carolina saying he was ready to retire from piracy forever. He would accept the king's pardon like a good citizen. He would become a law-abiding resident and pay taxes like everyone else in the colony. The governor, a man named Charles Eden, was happy to process the paperwork without asking too many questions. Blackbeard walked into the governor's mansion in Bathtown, accepted a formal royal pardon, and became a legal resident of North Carolina on paper. In reality, he was still raiding passing ships from his hidden base at Ocracoke and enjoying the best of both worlds. Chapter 8. The governor who was in on it. Governor Charles Eden of North Carolina was supposed to be a public servant who enforced the law against criminals. Instead, he was Blackbeard's secret business partner from the very beginning. The arrangement was simple and completely corrupt. Blackbeard would sail out from Ocracoke capture a French or Spanish ship full of valuable cargo like sugar and cocoa, and then sail back to the governor's port in Bathtown. Eden would hold a formal legal hearing and declare under oath that Blackbeard had found the ship drifting empty at sea, which made it legal salvage under international maritime law. Then they would split the cargo 50-50 right there in the governor's private office behind closed doors. The governor got rich selling stolen goods at the local market. The pirate got legal cover to walk around town openly without being arrested. Everyone was happy except the original owners who had been robbed of their ships. Eden's officials were all bribed with small shares to keep their mouths shut about what they saw. The local merchants were too scared of Blackbeard to complain to anyone who would listen and possibly help them. Blackbeard basically owned the entire government of North Carolina through a combination of cash payments and pure fear. He walked around the capital city like he owned the place, because he basically did own the people who ran it. He threw parties at the governor's mansion on weekends and bought supplies openly from the port without hiding his face. Nobody dared to touch him because the man who was supposed to arrest him was his business partner in crime. The whole system was rotten from the very top down, and Blackbeard had figured out that buying a corrupt governor was much cheaper and safer than fighting the entire British Navy. Chapter 9. The Webb Tightens. The governor of Virginia, a man named Alexander Spotswood, was not as easy to buy off as Eden. Spotswood watched Blackbeard's fake retirement from a distance and did not believe a single word of it for a moment. He knew that Blackbeard was still raiding ships along the coast because he kept getting reports from angry merchants who had been robbed blind and left stranded. He knew that the governor of North Carolina was clearly in on the scheme because the stolen goods kept appearing in the markets of Bathtown for sale. And he decided that enough was enough for one lifetime. Spotswood organized a secret military mission without telling a single person in North Carolina who might warn the pirate about what was coming. He hired two small but fast sloops, the Ranger and the Jane, and put Lieutenant Robert Maynard in command with clear written orders. Maynard was given 60 hand-picked men and strict instructions to find Blackbeard and bring him back dead or alive. No questions asked about the legal process or the governor of North Carolina. The chapter breathes here in the quiet before the storm hits hard. Blackbeard was sitting on Ocracoke Island, drinking rum with his crew and celebrating his successful fake retirement with laughter echoing across the water. He had absolutely no idea that a Navy lieutenant was sailing toward him through the darkness of the night, with 60 armed men ready for a fight to the death. Maynard arrived at the entrance to Ocracoke Inlet on the evening of November 21st, 1718. He anchored his ships out of sight behind a small island and waited patiently for dawn to break before making his move. Chapter 10. The Fight Where He Wouldn't Die. Maynard arrived at Ocracoke Inlet on the morning of November 22nd, 1718. Blackbeard saw the two Navy sloops approaching through the morning mist and knew immediately what was happening. His fake retirement was over. The Navy had found him. He cut his anchor cable and tried to escape through the shallow channels. When the water got too shallow for Maynard's larger ships to follow, Blackbeard thought he was safe from capture. He stood on his deck, shouted insults across the water, and dared Maynard to come and get him. Maynard did not turn back. He ordered his men to lighten the ship by throwing heavy supplies overboard so they could cross the shallow sandbar. The two ships met in close quarters. Blackbeard fired a massive broadside from his cannons that killed or wounded half of Maynard's crew in a single blast. Maynard ordered most of his surviving men to hide below deck and make the ship look abandoned. Blackbeard fell for the trick completely. He boarded Maynard's ship with his crew, expecting an easy victory over a handful of wounded sailors. Then Maynard's hidden men burst up from below deck, screaming bloody murder. The fight was savage and personal. Blackbeard took a pistol bullet to the body early in the fight, but kept swinging his cutlass. He took another bullet and kept fighting. Then another. He took a deep sword cut to the neck that should have killed any normal man instantly. He kept swinging. He broke Maynard's sword with his own blade. He was still fighting on his feet when a Scottish soldier stepped forward and slashed his throat open to the bone. Blackbeard finally fell to the deck. He had been shot 5 times and cut multiple times. He was still standing when they killed him. Chapter 11. The head on the bow. Maynard did not waste a single second after the fight ended. He walked over to Blackbeard's body, drew his knife, and cut off the pirate's head in one clean motion. He hung the severed head from the bowsprit of his sloop, right at the front where everyone could see it clearly. Then he sailed back to Virginia, with Blackbeard's head swinging in the wind like a hunting trophy mounted on a wall. The message was brutally clear to everyone who saw it. The most feared pirate in the entire Atlantic Ocean was dead, and his head was on display for every sailor in the harbor to see. When Maynard arrived in Virginia, the head was mounted on a tall pike at the entrance to the harbor for maximum visibility. People came from miles around to stare at it. Families brought their children to see the end of the monster who had terrorized their coast. The man who had blockaded cities and bought governors was now a rotting head on a stick for seagulls to peck at. Someone eventually took the cleaned skull, had it turned into a drinking cup, and used it at parties for years. Legend says the cup was passed around for a long time, each drink a toast to the demon who had finally been beaten. The social message of displaying the head was brutal but highly effective. You can terrorize people for 15 months, you can blockade entire cities, you can bribe governors, but in the end, your head ends up on a pole for everyone to laugh at. Chapter 12. The 15-month legend. Blackbeard never buried treasure anywhere. He never made anyone walk the plank in his entire career. He was not the richest pirate who ever sailed, or even the most successful by any reasonable measure. Black Bart Roberts captured over 400 ships in his career. Henry Morgan became the governor of Jamaica and died a wealthy, respected man. Blackbeard captured maybe 40 ships total in his 15 months of active piracy, but he remains the most famous pirate in the history of the world by a huge margin, because he understood something that nobody else in his profession understood at the time. Being scary is far more powerful than being successful over the long term. His image was a weapon that did more damage than his cannons. His reputation made merchant ships surrender before they even saw his flag. He died in a sword fight where he took 5 bullets and kept swinging until his head was cut off. 15 months of active piracy, and he changed the way we imagine pirates forever. Every time you see a pirate costume with a big black beard and a tricorn hat, you are looking at Edward Teach's lasting legacy to the world. He was not the best pirate who ever lived. He was not the longest-running pirate. He was not the richest pirate. But he was the one that nobody could ever forget. 300 years later, children dress up as him for Halloween. Movies are made about his life. Books are written about his adventures. and somewhere in the world there might still be a drinking cup made from his skull.